بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا ومولانا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Dear respected brothers and elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us in this dunya and placed us with a lot of bounties. And at times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us in regards to this bounty that He has given us. All the opportunities that He has given us, He will test us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we will definitely test you with matters in regard with fear and hunger and loss of wealth and life and productivity or produce. And so therefore be the glad tidings to those who have patience. And those who have patience are those when things afflict them. When affliction afflicts them, they would say, verily we are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and verily we to Him will return. They have the blessings of their Lord and mercy, and they will be those who are guided. It is easy for us to today pass day by day, and we have certain objective which arises in our life. Perhaps today is the day that my son would start to enter into school, and I want to see him to be a successful student, I want him to be a successful person in his life. Or I would undertake a new project at work, and I want to make sure that this project is done correctly so that I can increase myself in the status of my workplace, or at least not fall behind. And we have all these new objectives arising, regardless if you're a mother, father, student, child, whoever you are, there's always new challenges. And sometimes we forget to align ourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That all these challenges that enters into our lives, the purpose for us to achieve it and accomplish it should be in an alignment with the purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to. Be it that if we gain a new job, or if we're looking for a new job, our objective should be that, Ya Allah, allow me to gain this new job for the sake of you, for the sake that I could send my children, give my children an Islamic education, or so that my family in some way or another could come closer to you. This is the objective of life, dear brothers and elders. This is our objective of life. For us to align everything that we do to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I like to speak of, inshaAllah, bi'idhnillah, if Allah permits, 3 occasions in which not only the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also the companions were tested. And they were tested with severity. And the first one, we speak about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of his pursuit for the sake of Allah, despite of increasing odds against him. And we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during his time in Mecca, from the moment of Nubuwah, from the moment of prophethood, when Jibreel alayhi salam came down to him in that cave, we know that he has been met with challenges. And these challenges only increased. The Quraysh used to slander him. They used to say he's a madman. They used to say his words is bewitching. He said he's only a poet. You are only being entertained by his word because he's a poet. Then when none of this was working, and Umar and Hamza radiallahu anhuma came into Islam, they decided they needed to change their tactic. Because none of this type of slander was working, they started to offer him wealth. They said that, we'll join you, however you have to join us. One day we'll pray to your Allah, and the next day you'll pray to us, to our gods. Or they would start offering them women and wealth and all of these things. When that still didn't work, and the Prophet ﷺ remained firm on his purpose, he remained firm on his intention that he would spread this deen for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing else, they went a step further. They tested him by boycotting him. And this was the first time that a boycott ever happened in the land of Arab or ever recorded. That they refused to sit with the Muslims, they refused to interact with them, marry them, trade with them. They ousted them from Mecca and they had to go live in the valley. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts test upon test, but the test doesn't stop there. The Prophet ﷺ had two supports, an internal support and an external support. The internal support was his beloved wife Khadija radiallahu anha. And the external support which protected him physically from the other Quraysh, from the other Arabs, was the leader of the Quraysh, Abu Talib, his uncle. And during this period of time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him by taking away his internal and external support. Now he's left alone, vulnerable to the attacks, and he didn't have someone to confine into, as how he came down from the cave of Hira on that first miraculous moment when Jibreel alayhi salam came to him. And he said to his wife, cover me, zammiluni. And his wife was there to console him. All throughout his prophethood, all throughout the abuse that he went through, he had his wife. Suddenly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes that away, and takes away the external support. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't stop to test him there. This increasing odds keeps on coming. He realizes his preaching in Mecca would not have the same effect anymore without Abu Talib. So even though there was a number of Muslims, some of them had to migrate to Abyssinia because of the harsh condition that they were facing. Now it was only to get harsher. So the Prophet ﷺ thought to take an ally from elsewhere, thought to preach to another new group of people. So he went to Ta'if. And Ta'if, subhanAllah, what an occurrence and what a test for the Prophet ﷺ. Can you imagine that for so many years you've been calling your people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and every day that you go out of your house, you get a filthy look from the people. You get abused verbally, you get abused physically, and yet you can't do anything about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not permitted that action that He is allowed to retaliate for years. And now you have been handicapped. The support that you used to have has been removed. So now he thought to go to a new city and see if they would accept his calling. He didn't. The Ta'if did not just refuse his calling, but they acted in a way that Arabs would not have acted in that time. Normally, when a guest comes into your house, the Arabs of the time would go out of their way just to entertain and just to accommodate the guests. One of the narrations would say that a person would go right up to the extent of slaughtering a camel just to serve the guests meat. And a camel at the time is a car. So you total your car. Get rid, sell your car just to accommodate the guests. And this is what we would have expected from the people of Ta'if, but what would happen? The leader of Ta'if ridiculed him. He sent the children to humiliate the Prophet ﷺ. To humiliate the Prophet ﷺ by stoning him, chasing him out until he was bleeding all over, until his shoes were clogged with blood. until he came out into safety. For a person of our stature, we would easily say that this is an impossible task to do. I've tried all I can. For years I've been preaching to these people. And to go out to another town and at least receive hospitality, I didn't even receive that. I received the opposite of that. Would I be able to carry the courage to go to another town, say Jeddah or wherever it might be, go to another town and continue this message? Would I really be able to endure another humiliation? What happened to the Prophet ﷺ after that? As he came into safety, Jibreel alayhi salam comes down with an angel. And Jibreel alayhi salam introduces the Prophet ﷺ to the angel, and an angel to the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the angel that was guarding the mountains. This was the angel that was guarding the mountains. And there was mountains surrounding Ta'if. And he proposed an offer to the Prophet ﷺ. If you wanted to, I can crush this town so that the people will die for what they have done to you, O Prophet of Allah. But the Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ, he refused that offer. He said that it better be that they are spared, and I pray to Allah because of my weaknesses. Because of my weaknesses, and whatever that weakness is, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, because we don't attribute any defect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the people would not come into Islam. So I pray that they live on so that their children would enter into Islam. The question is, would we be able to act in a similar way if we have put ourselves in a similar situation or find a similar condition to what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through? Perhaps a particular person has done us wrong repetitively, and suddenly we have the upper hand to disgrace him. Would we act in the same manner of the Prophet ﷺ? Can we just imagine if the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, crush them? What would be the result of that? For one, perhaps the Quraysh would see that the message of the Prophet ﷺ is true. He went to Ta'if and they ridiculed him, and for that they were crushed. And so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's God, Allah, is true. And perhaps they would have entered into Islam. But was that the purpose of the Prophet ﷺ coming? The purpose of him, he was rahmatun lil alameen. He was a mercy to mankind, and for that he acted in the way he did. And after this long perseverance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally rewarded him with the gift of Isra Mi'raj, where he entered into a journey to Bayt al-Maqdis and ascended into the heavens. And so and the details go on how he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this was the first step that led him to the conquest, or to the migration of Medina, and eventually the conquest of Mecca. But the message here is that the perseverance that the Prophet ﷺ had, despite of the increasing odds. Another occurrence that happened in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we take it a few years forward, and the Prophet ﷺ is now in Medina. And a couple of battles has already occurred. The Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud. And now we are at a point where the Arabs are going to take their final stance. They will muster all the strength that they have and all the resources that they have. Because for so many years they were trying to get rid of the Prophet ﷺ. The tribes started to accumulate together. They started to ally amongst each other. And they came to Medina. They came to Medina to the Battle of Ahzab. And this was a surprise for the Muslims at the time. They didn't expect such a great army would be knocking at the front door. And they built a trench. They built a trench from the idea of Salman al-Faris. Salman al-Farsi. So, at this point, Medina was surrounded by enemies. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that even the believers, although they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear for them was so real that it was described that their heart was in their throat. The heart was in their throat. And this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them to see if they are able to endure the test. Because the Quraysh, the Arabs, wanted to eliminate the Muslims. But they could save themselves. They could save themselves and surrender. At least they have some type of leverage. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them. And on top of that, He tested them even more on how to endure through this battle. When the Jews of Medina turned against the Muslims, within the premise of Medina, the Jews who took a quadrant of Medina, betrayed the Muslims, betrayed the pact that they had, and sided with the Quraysh. And the Jews was guarding the only entrance. They had a fort to the only entrance that was available to Medina at the time. So they had the keys to the gate of Medina. And at this point, the Muslims were really tested. This was basically the point before failure. But they remained stern on the faith of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They believed that, as how Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the cave. He said, Abu Bakr expressed his fear to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as they can see the feet of the Quraysh who were hunting them down in front of them. And he expressed his fear to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the two should not fear when the third is Allah. The two of us should not fear when the third person with us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this was again the same occurrence. When they began to fear for their women to be taken, for their lives to be taken, for their wealth to be taken, and the end of the existence of Islam, they were fearing this. The Jews were about to let the Quraysh in, march straight into them. The defense that they have built on the trench was facing forward, yet the entrance was behind. So there would be no time to even move and strategize. So how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help the Muslims at this point? By the nusrah that He sent, by the help that He sent by a person named Nu'aym. And Nu'aym was a good ally. He was a man from the enemy. And he was a good ally with the Jews. And Nu'aym was very cunning with his tongue. He was a very cunning person. In the moment of that battle, Nu'aym had this change of heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent hidayah to him. And he made his way to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he approached the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he mentioned that, I want to accept Islam. I have a change of heart and I want to accept Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, you are only but one man. However, do your best. Do your best for this battle. So what did Nu'aym do? At the time, the Jews and the Arabs had already a pact. They said, allow us to enter into Medina through your fortress. So Nu'aym went to the Arabs and said to the Arabs, the Jews are planning to betray you. The Jews are planning to betray you. They are requesting head leaders of your tribesmen to enter into their fortress before you enter. So he's deceiving the Arabs. And then he went to the Jews and he said that the Arabs are planning to deceive you. So he said that the Arabs wanted to send their men, the Arabs wants to break their covenant with you. The Arabs just wanted the Jews to be caught out as traitors. So they will refuse their leaders to enter into your fortress. So the Jews wanted the Arabs to come in, but the Arab says that we don't trust you because you are going to betray us. So Nu'aym placed doubt in both parties. And from this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed doubt in both the parties' hearts. and the covenant broke apart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a massive wind through at the time of winter. And we know what it's like even in Brisbane when it's winter and it's cold. Now it is the desert, and the desert is very opposite. During the daytime it will be hot, and during the nighttime it will be very cold. And they couldn't light the fire because of the sand entering the food. Just like how we would have a barbecue on the beach and the sand will be in the food. They couldn't eat, they couldn't have warmth, and they gave up hope and they left. And so the Arabs left and the Jews were exposed. And at this point, because the Muslims were a greater majority than the Jew, the Muslim had the enemies removed from them, and they had also the Jews exposed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the Muslims' perseverance through hardship, changed the heart of Nu'aym to become the tongue which would unfold the plans of the enemies. Lastly, inshallah, we go further 2 years after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was at the Battle of Yarmouk. And this is the story of Khalid ibn Walid. Khalid ibn Walid is such a personality in Islam that he himself should be studied alone. He himself should be studied alone. He is sent to Iraq on the order of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq after the Battle of Ridda. After the Battle of the Apostate, he was sent to Iraq. Then the command was sent that he would traverse to Sham. And he would like to catch the enemy off guard. So he chose the most difficult terrain. However, it was the fastest terrain. And this was his ability all the way through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assisted him that he was able to carry an army through a desert that no one would cross and catch the enemy off guard. So he faces the Romans in Sham. As they enter into the battleground, the Muslims realize that the army was only 40,000, yet the Romans was an army of 250,000. Now, just to simplify that, if there was 4 men on this side and 25 men on this side, and they were to battle each other, it will be very obvious to see who's going to be the winner. Now imagine this in a tens of thousands scale. And what did the Muslims say? The Muslims had that fear in their heart. They said, look at how many the enemies are and look how little we are. But because of the faith of Khalid ibn Walid, he said, no, rather look at how many we are and look at how little they are. Because with us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when Allah is with us, then there is no limit to our number. And with them there is no Allah. And because of that, their number will dwindle. And this is something that you would see in the history of the companions. Especially the companions, when they face battles, they would face battle with the odds of 7,000 against 210,000. And yet there was only 77 companions who passed away in that battle. They would face great odds, but because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they trusted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was with them, then the help of Allah would come. And during this battle, there was a commander of the Romans by the name of Jarjara. He was intrigued by the stance of the Muslim to continue to fight and the zeal of the Muslims. So he came and approached Khalid ibn Walid. He came and approached Khalid ibn Walid until the horses' necks were touching. So they were that close, facing each other. They were talking. And he started to ask Khalid ibn Walid about, are you a sword of Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down? And tell me about the characteristics of a Muslim. And Khalid ibn Walid started to describe that he is, the Prophet ﷺ says that he is a sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because at a time he didn't believe in Islam. He was actually the cavalry leader who caused the downfall of the Battle of Uhud, the Muslims' downfall of the Battle of Uhud. He was the commander of the cavalry that took the Muslims from behind. That was Khalid ibn Walid. That was Khalid ibn Walid. So when he approached him, he said that at one point I didn't believe. But the moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed its iman in my heart, then he has unsheathed a sword. That from then on you would find Khalid ibn Walid continuously catching the opponents off guard and beating them in the battles. And as a matter of fact, Khalid ibn Walid is a question: in which battle did he die? He actually fought so many battles that every handspan of his body, you would not find a handspan without a scar on his body. Yet he says, oh, how it is that I've fought so many battles and fought so many enemies, and now I lie on my deathbed, passing away, not in a battlefield. So the success of the commander Khalid ibn Walid. And from this conversation with Jarjara began to realize what is the truth of Islam. And he, on that moment, from conversing with Khalid ibn Walid, he followed Khalid ibn Walid back into the lines of the Muslim, accepted Islam, prayed 2 rak'ah prayers, and then entered back into the battlefield against his enemy, who is now the Romans. With a change of heart, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places in him, Jarjara begins to fight the Romans. And as when the Romans sees this was something which was very demoralizing. And in the battlefield, morale is something which is great. If you are able to decrease the morale of your enemy, then success is most likely going to be yours, despite of the numbers. And this demoralized the enemies, and only 2,000 companions or 2,000 Muslims passed away in that battle, and they won that battle. They won that battle. So this was Khalid ibn Walid, despite of a great odd. When you're about to do something, when you are about to accept a challenge, and you see there are great odds against you within that challenge, you should not feel despair. If you have aligned yourself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help will be with you. Believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help will be with you. Definitely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us with fear and hunger, with a loss of lives, with a loss of wealth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the successful one are those who say, verily we are from Allah, and verily we are from Allah, and to Him we will return. الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. If we can just realize His purpose in life, that our life is very short, and that is our only task. In everything that we do, we find ourselves aligning. I'm going to wake up this morning. I'm waking up to make sure that I pray my salah. I'm going to work. I'm going to work to earn income, so that my children can get an education, an Islamic education, so that my children would not have to suffer. That they can focus their time on worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That I can spend more time with my family. Spend more time with my family at night. Free up my time, so that we can sit together and speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and come closer to Him together. If we align ourselves, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's test would come with His nusra, will come with His assistance. So inshallah we find every opportunity in our life to do so. وَالْآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ.